Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and this morning we're meeting with Annie Downs, author of 100 Days to Brave, Devotions for Unlocking Your Most Courageous Self. Annie, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Annie is an author, blogger, and speaker based in Nashville, Tennessee. Flawed but funny, she uses her writing to highlight the everyday goodness of a real and present God and loves traveling around the country speaking to young women, college students, and adults. She's written 5 other books: Looking for Lovely, Let's All Be Brave, Perfectly Unique, Speak Love, and Speak Love Revolution. You can learn more about her at anniefdowns.com and follow her on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Annie,
Yes,
a
sir.
couple of books you've written on Brave.
Mhm. Yeah,
So there's
for me,
a
it's because I'm not brave.
there's an underlying theme of Brave.
Mhm.
Okay, why?
Yeah, it's because it has never been easy for me to be brave. I kind of wish that I got to write books about things that were really easy for me, but that has never been the case so far. It has always been felt more like the Lord was kind of asking me to talk about things that I had to work through and had to really struggle through, and that's how it is with for me with courage is that I'm way easier at taking the easier way out. It's way easier for me to take the easy way out, not to push through and not to do the brave thing, not to do the hard thing I feel like I'm being asked to do. And so God kind of keeps nudging me towards doing the brave thing, having the brave conversations, going to places that I may not necessarily want to go. And so that's why I get to keep writing about it, is because it keeps being a topic in my life that I want to improve and be better at.
When did this first start?
Well, the first book about it was called Let's All Be Brave, and it came out in 2014. And so I was writing it the couple of years before that. But truly, when I think about when I first started wrestling about what courage looks like for me, I think back to high school when I was making decisions about where I wanted to go to college and where I wanted to be invest my time and whether I was going to do sports and mission trips and all these decisions I had to make. I remember times when I would pray and think, I'm just not sure I can do this. I'm not sure I can come up with this idea. I'm not sure this is the right thing. And there are times where you just have to stop asking and just do the right next thing. And so that's probably when I remember it really starting. I'm sure there, as with most things, I'm sure there's childhood moments where I was pushed about this and led about this. But when I started really making the choices for myself and really wrestling down what courage looks like for me, that was more towards high school.
You know, when we look at the Bible, we see in the Greek there's 3 names for love, or 3 names for the types of love. But yet you look in the Greek and you find that there's over 2,700 names for fears.
Mm.
So we seem to glorify fear. We seem to praise fear. We have Halloween dedicated to fear and fright. We have movies which are playing on fear and fright. And all of a sudden, we're in a world where the concept of safety is unraveled, and all of a sudden, we have to begin to wrestle with, can we be brave, and what does being brave look like, and how is that defined? When we look at the individual, the number one stated fear is public speaking.
Mm.
But yet, here you are out and standing in front of groups, speaking in publicly. Was that one of your fears?
No, it really wasn't. I think that's really interesting. I've been talking for a long time, and I kind of always enjoyed having an audience to some degree. That's probably how my little sisters would say it politely, is that I always enjoyed having an audience. So no, that wasn't a real fear for me. But I do think that's super interesting how many different definitions of fear, how many different translations of the word fear and fears pop up in the Bible. I feel like it sounds like God being really generous to us to not let any of our fears go undefined, right? I just think that when you said that, I thought, Man, that is so nice of the Lord that he didn't leave any of the rocks unturned, so that there wasn't a chance that there would be a fear that he hadn't dealt with for
Well,
us.
actually, those are psychological terms, not
Oh,
biblical terms, and they're fears which are everything from fear of uh, peanut butter sticking to the roof
sure.
of your mouth,
Sure.
or fear of chickens.
Right. Right.
And people are in therapy or have gone therapeutically to a doctor who is, when he's written their diagnosis, has written in the Greek terminology, uh, chickenophobia or
Sure.
whatever that phobia is. But we're plagued with phobias and fears. And God says clearly that I did not give you a spirit of fear. If we look at brave, we have to look at the opposite of brave. We have to look at the um, diagnosis that brave is the antidote for.
Yeah.
So, in order to need to be brave, what are all the characteristics of people who need to be brave?
Yeah, so to me, I'm thinking this through with you and kind of wondering, is fear the opposite of brave? I'm actually not sure that it is. To me, I wonder if complacency is the opposite of brave. If just being still, not in the positive, be still and know that I'm God, but if just a lack of movement is the opposite of brave sometimes. I think the characteristic of people who need to be brave are people. I think everyone, I don't know anyone who hasn't been asked by their life or by God to do something that felt too hard for them to do. And so I think all of us, in one way or another, are asked to be brave or called to be brave and are given the opportunity if we want it. I mean, it makes me think of David fighting the bear and the lion and Goliath. You know, he had to kill the bear and the lion, not knowing he was preparing for Goliath. So we always are facing these things in our lives that we don't know what they're preparing us for. And so to me, the main characteristic of who needs to be brave is all of us. I mean, all of us need to be brave. The question is, what does your brave look like? How does your brave look different than my brave? Because we all don't need to look exactly the same, but we all need to be brave in the life that God's given us.
You know, it's interesting. We've glorified brave. We have the medals of valor, the Congressional Medal of Honor. We award bravery, and then we wear bravery as a sign. Here, this guy has this ribbon, this heart, this star, this banner. I've done a lot of work in the former Soviet Union, and if you've ever want to see people adorned from head to toe, almost needing an entourage to drag their medals of bravery along, then they're an army that does that. But when we look at the human condition and we question, why do I need to learn how to be brave? We tend to think about the natural. Guy with a pipe bomb. Man walks into a church with a gun, and what am I going to do in response to that? Or I wake up in the middle of the night and there's somebody in my home. How am I going to be brave? Or my child or my husband or my friend has been diagnosed with something that is traumatic, and I've got to find a way to be brave. How do we classify? How do we categorize? Or is it really as simple as, if I'm uncomfortable with blank, I need to learn to be brave about blank?
Yeah, I do think there's a little bit of that. I do think that's true, that if something feels uncomfortable for not, I mean, I think it's different when it's people's safety, right? Like when it's your safety on the line. If I feel uncomfortable sleeping with the door unlocked at my house, so I need to get over it. I don't think that, and that's not what you're saying, but I don't think that is something we need to just come to grips with. But I do think if you consistently find yourself in a same pattern of fear, that you've got to trace back what the root of that is. Where did it come from, and what, and how is it affecting your life? It's probably affecting your life more than you realize, whether you're afraid of relationship or afraid of a certain uh, kind of travel, or afraid of making a mistake, afraid of losing control. I mean, there's all things like that that I think ask you, like, yeah, if I'm afraid of having friends get too close to me and know too much, then I need to be brave enough to start inviting people into my pain, right? Things like that. I think that's the kind of brave that I think about the most, is what are these little everyday yeses and nos that I can say that require a little courage, that are going to do something, build up something. It's just like working out, right? You don't start lifting 60-pound weights. You start lifting fives and tens, and so your muscles build. And I think the same is true with courage. Is, as you say, little yeses and nos in your everyday, these bigger opportunities come, and you can say yes and no at the right time to them when courage requires that of you.
How much of this requires that the first step in the process is an honest evaluation of myself in various situations and circumstances?
Oh, I think that's true I mean, you're far more experienced than I am, but I feel like that's probably true all the time. That there's, even this morning, I was sitting and spending time in my swirly chair right there, and just kind of thinking through all the things I try to control that I really can't control. And for me, it takes courage to have that conversation, even with myself, to assess and go, man, I'm trying to control all these things. What am I afraid of? What's going to happen if I'm not in control? What is my fear here? And I think that we each have to kind of do that on a regular basis, so that we will have, like, just an honest evaluation of ourselves, so that when an opportunity to do something outside of what feels comfortable, we go, oh yeah, I know that this is hard for me because I know that I'm scared to lose control. And this is a situation that I can't control. So yeah, this does feel scary to me. I get it.
In a lifetime, do you think we go through stages of fears and of having to find bravery to advance to the next level? Or it's really a global kind of, I need to go all the way back and I need to find out and shore up and clean up and kind of get brave?
Gosh, don't you think it's probably both? I mean, when I think about my life, I think, every other week I sit in my counselor's office and we deal with stuff that I'm going through right now, but we also deal with how things that I needed to shore up have triggered how I'm feeling right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think there's a lot of wisdom in looking at your story and looking at where you've been and figuring out, what do I need to talk about and press through and get healed so that I can be who I want to be today. But also, I absolutely think you have to take steps and courage to get to the next place. I'm single. And so in my thoughts, I think I can't be brave as a parent of a teenager right now because I'm not. But I have to be brave in dating relationships so that I can be brave to get married, so that I can be brave and have kids. So then I can be brave as a mother of a teenager, right? And so I can see that there's a process there. And I think that's true for a lot of areas of our lives. You aren't going to go from graduating college to being the president of a company. But there are steps of courage along the way that will get you where you want to go, if you are willing to do the thing that is right in front of you.
In this process of evaluating ourselves, who are the characters of the Bible who we have seen go from weak to strong, from meek to brave, or we can use to identify with similar thought processes or similar situations to our own, we might be able to relate to see how they process through in order to be able to create our own pattern by using the tools that you give us in 100 Days to Brave. In these devotions, you take us through some of them, but as you're in your daily reading, most people sit down to read the Bible because that's part of their daily Bible reading. but I'm not sure that they know what they're intending to do. Are they purposeful? Are they intentional? Do they go with the reason, today I want you to show me who or what or this, or today I want you to show me timidity growing to bravery?
Sure. Gosh, let me think. Who comes to my mind? One character that comes to my mind is Gideon, because he, was just like your average to less than average dude who God had a massive plan for that required that, and we get to see in Gideon's story that he does have a lot of fear and he does have a lot of spots where he holds himself back and God pulls him forward really kindly. So Gideon comes to my mind because he ends up being like a warrior, right? Even though he's kind of the runt of the litter. And I think while I wouldn't identify any of my friends as the runt of their litter, I know that we can each look at our own lives and go like, yeah, there are moments when I feel like the runt, right? And so I connect with Gideon. I think about Esther, and I think how Esther just kind of got ripped out of her life and ripped out of her everything she knew and all these plans that she probably had for what her life was going to be, and placed in a really unfamiliar and awkward place and had to figure out how to live that life all the way to where she rescued her people. And so she comes to my mind. I think of Mary, the mother of Jesus, and how she's kind of all her plans changed. My preacher yesterday at church talked about Joseph and what happens when our dreams for our life are shattered because God has a different dream, and literally gave Joseph a dream about Mary being pregnant with Jesus. So those are who come to my mind right off the bat of people that we see the Bible telling us about who really displayed that kind of courage. Who comes to your mind? Is there a character that comes to your mind?
The examples that you just gave, I think that Isaac maybe not timid, but here's one that was faithful enough to be brave enough to lay himself on an altar, knowing his father's intention was to kill him, and he was willing to do it because he shared the same faith of his father, which is, look, God made his promise, and he said, you're the son of the promise. So whatever happens after this, God will use to fulfill the promise, so it's all good. If you live, it's good. If you die, it's good. If he redeems you, it's good. If he doesn't. And so Isaac just kind of went along, had questions along the way, but they weren't really timidity. They were informational and reasonable.
And how old did they think Isaac was when that happened? Because a lot of times I feel like the pictures they do of Isaac and Jacob, he's like 6 or 7, like he's really small.
Yeah, we know the exact age.
Oh yeah, tell me.
He was between 30 and 33.
See, that's incredible, because I think we don't give him enough credit for being, because like when I think of the art that people have done around that story, he's a young man, like a kid. And I just don't think about...
And there's a reason for this, is because the binding of the Isaac is the crucifixion of Jesus. It's the same story.
Sure, yeah.
I'll give you a 1-minute rabbinical moment.
Oh yeah, okay? I'm ready. I love
this. They were both miracle birth.
Mm-hmm.
They were both the only sons of their father. They both did their father's will. They both left 2 servants behind that didn't see what happened. They both carried their wood for the offering up the hill. They both said that they would be back. Isaac was redeemed by a male ram wearing a crown of thorns, caught in the thicket. One was the promised son, the other one was the son of the promise. And so when we see this perfect picture of God showing us exactly what's going to happen 2,000 years later, it's the same picture. It's the same. It says, take your son, your only son, Isaac. And he clearly makes it his only son, which is a bigger miracle. 80-something-year-old, almost 90-year-old barren woman, or a virgin, young virgin, getting pregnant. Well, even if it's close to being a toss-up, there's still miracle births. Mm-hmm. So it's the same story, same pattern, and interestingly enough, same location, Moriah, which is the Temple Mount. So we know all of this was to prepare us to understand that a father would be willing to sacrifice his own son in order to fulfill a promise. Imagine me as a Jew coming along and reading about the crucifixion of Jesus and thinking to myself, what kind of father would sacrifice his son when I already have in my background
Right.
the story of Abraham and Isaac, and understand exactly about God's plan of redemption and how he works that way. So, that to me is that concept of brave and more in the realm of the unknown. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of where I wanted to lead you before break, is we tend to identify fearful moments, but the reality is most of us are afraid of the unknown. Mm-hmm. That's really our biggest fear. And that goes to that control issue. That goes to, if I can't control the outcome, then what if? And when we run those what if scenarios, then what if? Well, on the good side, what if? Yay, team. But on the other side, what if? Ooh, fear.
Yeah.
Okay, that would destroy me. Job made it very clear. He said, that which I have feared the most has come upon me. So this concept of being brave and finding steps towards being brave becomes an essential character tool. It's something that we're not, we hear the words, the instruction, be brave. That's great, but I don't know what that means. I don't know how that translates. Mm-hmm. I don't, suck it up.
Right.
Walk it off, shake it off. All those are be brave. But you've given us a tool of 100 days of devotions to brave. And all of us need to find a way to reconcile. And I think that the smartest thing that you did was you opened it up by a chapter entitled Be Brave Enough to Start. Mm-hmm. You were always meant to be brave. And you back it up with, from Isaiah, for I am the Lord your God who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear, I will help you. When you were writing this, I can almost see myself writing this and every day getting more and more fired up. Yeah. Every day going, okay, bring it. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, bring it by day 100. Okay, bring it all at once. I couldn't handle it one at a time before. It's like being at a baseball at a net and hitting one at a time. Okay, one at a time, nothing. Give me 100. Okay, right. I'm ready. And that's kind of where I went as I navigated through this. We're talking with Annie Downs, author of 100 Days to Brave, Devotions from Unlocking Your Most Courageous Self. Every one of us needs to find brave. Regardless of our circumstances, regardless of our lives, we need to find the brave that God created us to be. Brave doesn't mean you're the warrior or you're the warrior princess. It doesn't mean that you're to become the king. It doesn't mean you're supposed to go join the army. But being brave in the circumstances that causes you to draw upon the wellspring of all that God has said. Brave comes from his word. And that word that I've hidden in my heart that I might not sin against you, O God, the King David said, was really saying, Lord, your word I've hidden in my heart that I might be brave, that when I face adversity, when I face temptation, that I might not stumble because you've given me your word and that has girded me up. Being brave means being girded up by the very word of God. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into 100 Days to Brave, Devotions for Unlocking Your Most Courageous Self with Annie Downs. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Back. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Annie Downs, author of 100 Days to Brave, Devotions for Unlocking Your Most Courageous Self. Annie, welcome back to the program.
Oh, thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
Annie, you take a stroll through a number of chapters in the book, and the first chapter, of course, was Brave Enough to Start. And as you move through that and you get us going and you kind of let us know that God's promises for us is that, first of all, every word that God has said and promised to us is true. But now we have to be brave enough to be ourselves. That's hard for a lot of people because we're in a society where self is done by comparison, by reflection. Yeah. As a matter of fact, in most homes, you find many mirrors. Why?
Well, so, I think the thing that gets lost in our culture is permission to be yourself. Yeah, permission to be different. And I mean, in my life, mirrors are important because I do need to be reminded of what I need to see, right? The good, the bad, all the difference. I think you need that for my life, but also, I just think it's important that we give each other permission to be truly who God has for us, because I can't spend my life trying to be one of my siblings, right? I can't spend my life trying to be like the next door neighbors. I want to spend my life being me and being the best, healthiest version of me. And that takes courage, because that means there are going to be decisions that I make that disappoint people, that make me look different, that make me sound different, that make me prioritize things differently. But that's also why you invite people into your story, so that people can kind of help you build guardrails to make sure you're not acting insane, right? And going wackadoodle. But for me, I have these people in my life that kind of speak into helping me be the best version of me and not the best version of my neighbors.
When we start to examine ourselves and find out who we are first, so that we can then be brave enough to be that, what do we do with the stuff we find that we're disquieted by?
Well, I feel like that happens to me frequently. So, I think the first thing is to just say that that's how you feel. I think that is really fair and really true to go, man, I do not like some of this stuff I've discovered about myself present, that I've discovered about myself in the past, that I've discovered about my inclinations, the way I want to sin and the way I want to be selfish. And so I think the first thing is just to confess that that is true. And then I think it's about, feels like a fancier word than I mean, but submitting it to God. And just, so for me, what that looks like, even as I said this morning, thinking about my desire to control everything, I didn't come up with a good answer. I just went, hey, God, I see this about me. I see that I am trying to control things. Will you step in and help me? Will you just help me with that? And so then I'm spending today seeing these little moments where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm trying to control this. Okay, God, this is where I need you again. So that's what it looks like for me, is it is just recognizing it, calling it, these areas that get stirred up when I let God kind of examine my heart, and I just put them back to him and go, I don't know what I do with this necessarily. Bring the right people in to walk this story with me. Show me the scriptures that are connecting here. This morning I ended up in Romans 8 where it's about how the Spirit intercedes for us when we don't know what to pray, because I was like, I don't know what to do about this, but I know that the Holy Spirit intercedes for me. And so, okay, do that. Pray what I don't know how to pray. And then it's all about Christ's love for us. And so that's where it led me this morning. But it was because I started with just confessing to myself and to God that I can see that there's something sideways in me right now about this that I want to face.
Annie, when you submitted your manuscript for editing,
yes,
had you already set the chapters in order, or did they work on that with you to rearrange in some way the order of the chapters?
So when we decided to do 100 days, because the first question was, do we do 100 or 365? And we decided 100, because partly because I think you can finish anything you start in 100 days. I'm never quite sure I can do something for a year, but I'm pretty sure I can do something for 3 months. And so we sat down here in my office, just through those doors. We sat down in my office, and with one of those really big sticky notes, the ones that are like half a wall. And we just wrote out 100 boxes. And I thought, if I could sit and have coffee with a friend for 5 minutes every day, what would I say to them about being brave? And so that's how we got the sections. I just said, we need to talk about work, and we need to talk about relationships, and we need to talk about how you treat your body. We need to talk about your relationship with God. And so we kind of laid out the topics, and then I kind of ordered them almost inside to outside, almost kind of like, here's the most personal of like you doing the work with God on you, and then relationships, work, your church, your environment, the rest of your life. And so, yeah, I kind of my editor and I sat here for 2 days probably and laid out all 100 days, what sections we wanted, what each day was going to say, and what scripture was going to be for each day.
So the order that it was published in is the order you sent it to them?
Yes, sir.
Because the third one
I'm grabbing my copy.
What's that? You're grabbing your copy?
I have my copy. I'm ready.
Okay, good. So you have to be brave enough to start. You have to be brave enough to be you. And then you come to one that one might say, shouldn't this come first?
Brave enough to believe God.
Brave enough to believe God.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what was going on in my mind about that. The brave enough to start has to come first, because you got to be willing to almost commit in your heart that you're going to do this whole thing, that you're ready to have a conversation about being brave. So before you even can consider what you and God are walking through and what's happening in that relationship, you have to be willing to be a part of this. And then to me, the second thing, is are you willing to take who you really are to God, right? So are you willing to turn around and look in yourself and figure out, not look in yourself for power or for peace, but look and go, okay, am I willing to bring this person? Do I believe that God made me on purpose? Do I believe that I am who he says I am? And will I bring that to God? And then the third section was believing God, because I think after you understand that you're not an accident, that you're on purpose, then the next right thing is, okay, so then if that's true and God says that, I need to be brave enough to believe that everything he says is true. That outside of me, everything he says about the world, everything he says about my future, everything he says about my friends, about the planet, about what he is doing is true. So that's why it went third.
So I start off, brave enough to start, I start listening to these promises of God. And it's kind of interesting because in any new program, the first part of it, you get pretty excited about it. But then you kind of bring me up to a brick wall and say, okay, before you're going to take one step further.
That's right.
All right. You've spent, I don't know, 10 days, 20 days, whatever you've spent so far invested in this. Now's the hard question.
Yes. That's exactly right. Because I think one of the core issues in my life, and one of the core things I battle is believing that God is who he says he is, right? Like that. I think because sometimes my circumstances in my life do not match what I believe the Bible says about God's character, right? There are times when we look at our lives and we go, I know God provides, but I can't pay the bills. I know God is kind, but this doesn't feel kind, whatever this is. And so we get to choose to believe that God is who he says he is, even when our circumstances don't tell us that. So that to me is the rest of my life can be built on that rock. I just need to make sure that rock is in place.
Well, I think it's intentional and unintentional. It happens to be extremely well placed, because you can't go past chapter 3. And it could take you 100 days just to do chapter 3 until you come away from it with a decision. And all of this requires you to make a decision. Right? Do I believe that I am going to be brave enough to do this? Right? then we come right past that. So now I have a belief in God, which now
Yeah.
opens the universe to me.
Yeah.
And now, and it's a question. Am I brave enough to dream?
Yeah.
Am I willing to dream? And am I brave enough to believe that my dreams will come true? Because all that's contained within brave enough to dream. As a matter
Right.
of fact, that's really the framework of all of the chapters, is when you come to the topic area, you have to say, am I brave enough to work hard? Am I willing to work hard? Am I willing to devote myself to being brave at working hard? And am I going to allow myself to expect the results that are promised to me in Scripture for working hard? If you're faithful with the small things, God will make you master over much. These are the kind of things of am I going to be the one that buries my talent, or am I going to be the one that brings the increase? And we go through those challenges. All right. Brave enough to love others. But I have to ask you the question, is or is not the first question brave enough to love myself?
Yeah, I do think that. I mean, I think that's what Jesus said, right? He said, love others as you love yourself. And we don't really talk about that quite as much as I think we probably should. But yeah, that is the first thing, is if I can't pull from a well that's empty. If I don't believe what Romans 8 says, that I can't ever be separated from Christ's love, that he loves me no matter my mistakes, no matter my highs and lows, I can't invite other people into that kind of love. And I can't express that kind of love to people. So absolutely. And I do think it takes a lot of courage to love other people, because when you love other people, you're putting yourself at risk. You're saying, you matter so much to me that I am going to use that 4-letter word and say that I love you. And you might not always feel that back, and you might not say that back, but are you brave enough to put in, to believe that it matters how you love other people, and to be in a relationship with your family and friends and with your spouse and in dating, and go like, okay, I'm willing to do the work on myself with God so that I can be brave enough to be in these relationships.
So then we've we've gone through these days of exploration of being brave enough to love others.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to start with ourselves. We then have to step out of ourselves to then go external. But then I actually think that the next chapter is the hardest one of all of them.
Yeah.
I think
I would agree with you.
I think this is the deal breaker. This is the one that is the, if there is a crack, you're now, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 days into this program, 50 days into this. I'm over halfway through, and now I have to face the hardest, most difficult area of my life. The one thing that every person wrestles with: change.
Yeah.
You are wrestling with change today.
Yeah, right. Yes, sir. That is the truth.
So, are we brave enough to face change?
Because it's going to come either way, right? That's the problem, is that change, that old adage, the only thing that doesn't change is always coming, right? So that's just the truth, is that life is constantly changing. Are you brave enough to face that? It doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be challenging. It just means we don't get to bury our head in the sand while the world changes around us. We need to be part of it. We don't want to be, something we talk a lot about here at work, is we don't want to be thermometers. We want to be thermostats. We want to change the atmosphere and change the world around us. We don't just want to read the temperature. And so we have to be willing to accept when things are changing, to be brave enough to walk into change, even when we don't know, like you talked about earlier, Rabbi, even when we don't know how it's going to go and how the ending is, are we willing to step into change?
Who would be a good example for change for you in the Bible?
Well, gosh, I feel like all the ones we talked about, the center of their courage was change, right? But then I also think of Paul and the days the days right before when he was Saul, when he has such a massive sudden transition and then becomes Paul. And I just think there had to have been, not only was the change him personally require so much courage, but just to face your community as a different person takes a lot of courage. I see that in the Bible, and I see that in real life when my friends who get involved in their church community, or who really change their lives, whether it's they stop drinking or they end a relationship, they change their lives. And not only does it take courage to change, but then they have to be in the community as different. And I think that takes a ton of courage. So Paul comes to my mind off the top of my head. Peter, I love Peter. He's like my very favorite guy after Jesus in the New Testament. And I think he really had to face change and watch his culture shift as his life changed.
After change, you go to persevere, because the natural tendency is, now that I'm on a path of change, is to slip back to the way I was. And that perseverance of pressing on, moving forward, like Paul says, not that I've accomplished this, but this I've done, forgetting what's behind, I press on to the mark of the high calling in Christ Jesus. So when you look at perseverance, and really all of these are more, once I've gone through it, the 100 days, I now have a foundation for where to go back to, and it really is a 365-day program.
Right.
Because I'm going to draw on things that I'm challenged with, I find myself not being brave about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'll tell you, in my personal life, Rabbi, nothing has changed me more in the last 5 years than when I learned to persevere through pain and when I quit quitting. And it takes a lot of courage to look at your pain in the face and walk into it and let God heal it and not give up on it and run from it. And so I've seen in my life, really, there's not been an agent of more personal change in my life than choosing to persevere even when things got hard. And an example is our pastor left our church really suddenly about 1.5 years ago. And obedience for me in that season looked like staying at church. For others, it looked like leaving. But for me, I knew that the right thing was for me to stay at church. And I had to persevere through a lot of pain and some mourning and some loss in order to make it to the side where we have a new pastor who's incredible and loves God and is driving our church forward. And it's really beautiful. But I could have missed all that if I wouldn't have been obedient to the perseverance God was calling me to. And that's just one example. I mean, there have been so many times in the last few years where God has said, like, I know this hurts, but don't give up. Just don't give up. I really think the very best things in life are just on the other side of where you were going to give up.
So that's why your natural progression is after persevering to pursue healing, because if you persevere, it's like fighting through the thorn bush. There's some healing. There's some wounds. There's some scratches. There's some emotional issues of pressing through an obstacle or an issue in your life that requires you to persevere. You have to be brave enough to pursue healing.
Mm-hmm. And really, that whole section, it's about emotional healing, but there's a lot about how you treat your physical body. And how are you resting enough? Are you taking an actual Sabbath like we're to? Are you eating right? Are you exercising? Are you doing for your body what takes courage? It takes courage to treat your body well and to say no to things that everybody else is saying yes to, or say yes to things that other people aren't willing to do. And so I think that that part of perseverance is caring about your spirit, soul, and your body. And healing comes when you recognize that all three parts of who you are deserve your attention.
And that makes quite a bit of sense. So after you're healed, now you have to be brave enough to serve.
Right. Right. Doesn't that feel like that's the next natural progression? That's what I mean, when we were sitting in there, I thought, okay, so what is my healing looks like, and what is the progression looks like? Well, it's looked like once God walked me through so much of the healing, it was time for me to invest in other people and time for me to share this and make it and serve the people around me. And so that has been really the next right thing to do is, are you brave enough to set aside a Tuesday night and go serve at your local shelter because people need you, and they do, and they need your help, and they need to see that you are pursuing health so that they'll want to.
It makes so much sense. Then you finish up and you begin to wrap up with brave enough to be where you are, and just with brave enough. We've got about 3 minutes left in the segment. Give us all a pep talk on bravery.
Yeah. So here's the thing that I think is really true is that God has made us each so unique. And we know that because even identical twins have things that are different, right? We all look so different. If we can just also believe that God has made our insides to look that different, then what we do is say to the Lord, like, what's the brave thing you have for me today? And we don't have to go out and get brand new lives. We can be brave in the life that we already have. And I think that's the pep talk I always need is, Annie, don't look at what other people in your field are doing. Don't look at what other people in your life place are doing. Don't look at what other people in your city are doing. Look at what God's called you to do and do that brave thing. Because then I think if we each do the brave thing God has for us, it kind of shoots off a little confetti popper in our life, and it gets confetti on other people, and they go, okay, I want to do that. I see Annie being brave. I want to be brave. I see that in my pastor's life, that he moved his family to Nashville to kind of pursue what God had for him. I go, if he's brave enough to run after God like that, I can do it too, even if it looks really different in my life.
Well, that's a strong message for all of us, that regardless of what life hands you, God has given you the ability to be brave. This is a 100-day devotional, 100 days to brave, devotions for unlocking your most courageous self. Annie Downs has presented much of it drawn from personal experience, much of it drawn from her life and her pursuit to be brave, to be strong for the Lord, because it was the mighty ones, the in Hebrew El Gibor, the mighty ones of God, who were the ones who did exceedingly more for the kingdom. That's why their names were engraved in the scriptures. They became examples of strength and bravery and perseverance, even in times of suffering. And even though they fell, they stood up. And they were brave enough to go back out again and do it again, even unto the sacrifice of their own lives. And so, Annie, thank you for taking us on this journey. 100 Days to Brave, devotions for unlocking your most courageous self. Annie Downs, may the Lord bless you. Merry Christmas to you, and may this be your best year yet. Thanks so much for being with us here on Revealing the Truth. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. That was so kind of you, Rabbi. I'm so grateful. And really, I'm so encouraged by your words. I can't wait to study through some of this. I'm really, really thankful.
Good. Well, follow us on Facebook and Twitter and all over, and we'll be more than happy to have you on when your next book comes out.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Y'all have a great day. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Shalom.
Thanks.